The warm spring breeze ruffled Karen's perfectly coiffed hair as she strutted through the park, her designer handbag swinging from her manicured fingers. She radiated an air of entitlement, her gaze sweeping over the counters around her with disdain. As she approached a bench, her eyes landed on a man hunched over, struggling to tie his shoelaces. His movements were clumsy and uncoordinated, and Karen instantly felt a surge of disgust. Without a moment's hesitation, she sneered, "Oh, look at you. Can't you do anything right?" The man froze, his head slowly turning toward Karen. She was taken aback by the pain and vulnerability in his eyes, but her arrogance quickly took over. "What? Are you deaf or something? I'm talking to you, you pathetic excuse for a human being." A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Karen thrived on the attention, puffing out her chest as she continued her tirade. "You should be ashamed of yourself, taking up space in a public park. Go crawl back under whatever rock you came from." The man's expression shifted from hurt to something darker. He stood up with surprising agility, his shoulders squared as he faced Karen. "I'll have you know, I'm a Paralympic gold medalist. I lost my leg saving a child from a burning building. What have you done with your life, other than judge and belittle others?" Karen's mouth dropped open, her face flushing with embarrassment as the crowd erupted in murmurs and applause. She had never felt so humiliated, her carefully constructed persona of superiority crumbling around her. Turning on her heel, she stormed off, her designer heels clicking furiously on the pavement. As she retreated, the Paralympic champion shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Some people never learn," he muttered, knowing that his words had struck a nerve. Karen's cheeks burned with shame as she replayed the scene in her mind. How dare that cripple embarrass her in front of everyone? She had always prided herself on her quick wit and sharp tongue, but this time she had been utterly outmatched. Fuming, Karen marched straight to her favorite cafe, determined to drown her sorrows in a triple-shot, extra-foam latte. As she waited in line, her mind raced, trying to come up with a way to regain her lost dignity. She couldn't let this incident slide. She had to find a way to get back at that arrogant. As Karen sipped her overpriced latte, her mind whirred with schemes and plots. She couldn't shake the humiliation of being bested by that cripple in the park. Her pride demanded vengeance, and she was determined to get it. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. A sly grin spread across her face as she pulled out her phone and began furiously tapping away. If she couldn't take on the man directly, she would find another way to get back at him, by going after the thing he prized most. Karen spent the next few hours meticulously crafting an anonymous, scathing review of the Paralympic Champions Charity Foundation. She carefully constructed a narrative that painted him as a greedy, corrupt fraud, exploiting the less fortunate for his own gain. With a satisfied smirk, Karen hit submit and watched as the review went live on the organization's website. She knew it would only be a matter of time before the fallout began. True to her prediction, the next morning, Karen's phone was buzzing with notifications. The review had gone viral, sparking outrage and skepticism among the champion's supporters. Soon, the media caught wind of the scandal, and the story began to spread like wildfire. Karen reveled in the chaos, sipping her morning coffee as she scrolled through the heated comments and frantic social media posts. She had finally gotten her revenge, and the sense of vindication was intoxicating. But as the day wore on, Karen's glee slowly gave way to a nagging sense of unease. Perhaps she had gone too far this time. The accusations she had leveled were serious, and the potential consequences were far-reaching. What if the champion's reputation was irreparably damaged, even if the claims were false? A twinge of guilt crept into Karen's mind, but she quickly pushed it aside. No, she told herself, this man deserved everything he got. He had embarrassed her in front of everyone, and now he was getting a taste of his own medicine. Still, as the negative press continued to mount, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that she might have bitten off more than she could chew. She had always been a master of manipulation, but this time she might have unleashed a force that she co. The next few days were a whirlwind of media coverage and public outcry. Karen watched with a mixture of pride and unease as the scandal surrounding the Paralympic Champions Charity Foundation continued to snowball. Reporters were clamoring for interviews, and the champion himself was forced to hold a press conference to address the allegations. Karen leaned in, her eyes glued to the screen, as the man she had mocked stood before the cameras, his expression a mix of sadness and determination. "These accusations are false and baseless," he stated firmly. "My foundation has always been dedicated to helping those in need, and we have a long track record of transparency and accountability. This is nothing more than a malicious attempt to discredit our work and tarnish my reputation." Karen's heart raced as the champion fielded question after question, his responses calm and confident. She couldn't help but admire his poise under pressure, even as she resented the fact that he was gaining sympathy from the public. As the press conference drew to a close, the champion leveled a piercing gaze directly at the camera. "I know who is behind this smear campaign, and I can assure you that I will not rest until the truth is revealed and justice is served." Karen's blood ran cold. Surely he couldn't know it was her, could he? She had been so careful to cover her tracks, using a fake online identity and proxy servers to hide her involvement. But the way he had looked at the camera, it was as if he was staring straight into her soul. Panic began to set in as Karen realized the gravity of her actions. She had underestimated the champion's resilience and determination, and now she was facing the very real possibility of being exposed and facing the consequences of her vindictive plot. Trembling, she closed her laptop and paced her living room, her mind racing with possibilities. Should she come clean and try to make amends? Or should she double down on her efforts to discredit the champion and bury the truth? The choice weighed heavily on her, and Karen knew that whatever she decided, her life would never be the same. She had let her pride and arrogance lead her down a dangerous path, and now she was facing the prospect of losing everything. Over the next few days, Karen found herself in a state of constant anxiety. The media coverage of the scandal refused to die down, and the public's outrage only seemed to grow with each passing moment. She had hoped that the anonymous review would be the end of it, but the champion's unwavering defense and the outpouring of support from his followers had thrown a wrench in her plans. Now she was facing the very real possibility of being exposed as the mastermind behind the smear campaign. Desperate to save face and protect her reputation, Karen began to consider her options. She could try to come clean and apologize, but the thought of admitting her wrongdoing filled her with dread. Her pride simply wouldn't allow it. Alternatively, she could continue to deny any involvement and double down on her efforts to discredit the champion. But as she contemplated this course of action, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it was a losing battle. As Karen paced her apartment, her mind racing, a knock at the door startled her. Cautiously, she peered through the peephole, only to find a stern-faced police officer standing on her doorstep. Karen's heart began to pound as she slowly opened the door, her hands trembling. "Can I help you, officer?" "Ma'am, we've received a complaint about a series of harassing online reviews targeting a local charity organization. The investigation has led us to your address. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Karen's mouth went dry, and she could feel the blood draining from her face. This was it. Her carefully constructed web of lies was about to unravel. Panic surged through her, and she desperately searched for a way to evade the officer's questioning. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, silently cursing herself for her poor acting skills. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's expression remained stoic as he studied her closely. "Ma'am, we have evidence that links you to the creation of these false reviews. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to the station for further questioning." Karen's mind raced, her heart pounding in her ears. She had never imagined that her actions would have such dire consequences. As the officer cuffed her wrists and led her to the waiting patrol car, a sense of dread and resignation washed over her. She had let her pride and arrogance cloud her judgment, and now she was about to face the full weight of her mistakes. Karen could only hope that she would find a way to salvage her reputation and avoid the harsh penalties that were S. The harsh fluorescent lights and cold steel of the interrogation room only served to heighten Karen's sense of unease as she sat across from the stern-faced detective. Her heart raced, and she could feel the beads of sweat forming on her brow. "Ms. Evans, we have overwhelming evidence that you are the one responsible for the false and defamatory reviews targeting the Olympians Charity Foundation," the detective said, his voice calm but unyielding. Karen swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. I don't know what you're talking about. I had nothing to do with any of that." The detective leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "We traced the IP address used to post those reviews back to your home computer. We also have witnesses who saw you in the park the day you confronted the Olympian." Karen's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of this predicament. She had always been skilled at manipulating people and situations to her advantage. But this time, the evidence seemed overwhelming. "This is all a big misunderstanding," she insisted, her voice wavering. "I was just having a bad day, and I got carried away. I never meant for any of this to happen." The detective shook his head, unimpressed by her flimsy excuses. "Ms. Evans, your actions have had very real consequences. You've caused significant damage to the Olympian's reputation and the work of his charity. I'm afraid we have no choice but to press charges." Karen's heart sank as the gravity of the situation dawned on her. Charges. This could ruin her reputation, her social standing, her entire way of life. She had always been able to rely on her wealth and influence to get her out of trouble. But this time, she was facing the very real possibility of serious legal consequences. "Please, you have to understand," she pleaded, her eyes wide with desperation. I never meant for it to go this far. I was just so humiliated and angry, and I wanted to get back at him. I didn't think it would blow up like this." The detective remained unmoved, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Evans, your actions were calculated and malicious. You deliberately set out to destroy this man's reputation and the work of his charity. That's a serious crime, and you're going to have to face the consequences." As the detective stood to leave the room, Karen felt a sense of panic wash over her. This couldn't be happening. She was supposed to be the one in control, the one who always came out on top. But now, her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, and she had no idea how to pick. The days that followed Karen's interrogation were a blur of legal proceedings and media scrutiny. Her once spotless reputation had been tarnished beyond repair, and the fallout from her actions was proving to be far-reaching and devastating. As the case against her unfolded, the evidence mounted, and the prosecutors built a damning case. Karen's attempts to downplay her involvement or claim it was all a misunderstanding fell on deaf ears. The digital trail was simply too extensive to ignore. In the midst of the legal turmoil, Karen found herself facing public condemnation like never before. Her once admiring social circles turned their backs on her, and she became the subject of intense media scrutiny. Every detail of her life was dissected and analyzed, from her lavish spending habits to her questionable business dealings. The Paralympic champion, meanwhile, emerged as a sympathetic figure, his charity foundation receiving an outpouring of support and donations from the public. Karen watched with a mix of envy and dread as he held press conferences, gracefully addressing the allegations and reaffirming his commitment to making a difference in the lives of the disabled. As the trial date approached, Karen's desperation grew. She had always been able to rely on her wealth and influence to smooth over her indiscretions. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. The prospect of criminal charges and potential jail time loomed over her, shattering the illusion of her untouchable status. In a last-ditch effort to salvage her reputation, Karen turned to her team of high-powered attorneys, instructing them to pull out all the stops. They filed motions, argued for mitigating circumstances, and painted Karen as a victim of her own ego and misguided sense of entitlement. But the judge remained unmoved, and the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution. Karen was found guilty on multiple counts, including defamation, harassment, and obstruction of justice. The sentence was stiff, several years in prison, coupled with hefty fines and community service. As the verdict was read, Karen sat in stunned silence, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The once untouchable socialite had been brought low, forced to confront the consequences of her own arrogance and cruelty. In the days that followed, Karen's downfall became the talk of the town, a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked privilege and entitlement. The Paralympic champion, on the other hand, emerged as a beacon of resilience and redemption, his charity foundation thriving in the wake of the scandal. For Karen, the realization that her actions had cost her everything, her reputation, her freedom, and her way of life, was a bitter pill to swallow. As she prepared to begin her prison sentence, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever find a way to emerge from the ashes of her self-influence. The dimly lit prison walls felt like a suffocating embrace, closing in on Karen as she struggled to adapt to her new reality. Gone were the luxuries and privileges she had once taken for granted, the designer clothes, the lavish parties, the adoring social circle. Instead, she found herself surrounded by stark, sterile cells and the harsh glares of her fellow inmates. As the days turned into weeks, Karen's sense of isolation and despair only deepened. She had always been the center of attention, the one who commanded respect and deference. But now she was just another number in the system, stripped of her identity and forced to confront the gravity of her actions. In the quiet moments between the monotony of prison life, Karen found herself plagued by guilt and regret. She had let her pride and entitlement cloud her judgment, and the consequences had been devastating. The memory of that fateful day in the park, when she had mocked the Paralympic champion, haunted her, a constant reminder of the depths to which she had sunk. One day, as Karen sat in the prison yard, a familiar face caught her eye. It was the Paralympic champion himself, visiting the facility as part of his charitable outreach program. Karen's heart raced as he approached her, his expression unreadable. "I thought I might find you here," he said, his voice low and measured. "I've been following your case with great interest." Karen felt a surge of panic, her mind racing with a million excuses and justifications. But before she could speak, the champion raised his hand, silencing her. "I'm not here to judge you, Karen. I've come to offer you a chance at redemption." Karen's brow furrowed in confusion, her eyes searching the champion's face for any sign of ulterior motive. "Redemption. After everything I've done." The champion nodded solemnly. "I believe that everyone deserves a second chance, even those who have caused harm. And I think you have the potential to use your experience to make a real difference in the world." He explained that he wanted Karen to join his charity's outreach program, working directly with the disabled community to provide support and resources. It was a chance for her to atone for her actions, to use her privilege and influence for good instead of evil. At first, Karen was skeptical, unsure of whether she could ever truly make amends. But as the champion spoke, a glimmer of hope ignited within her. Perhaps this was her opportunity to reclaim her life, to rebuild the shattered pieces of her reputation, and find a new purpose. With a deep breath, Karen nodded, her eyes brimming with tears of both shame and gratitude. "I'll do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." As the champion extended his hand, Karen knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous. But for the first time in years, she felt a spark of genuine purpose, a chance to redeem herself and find a new. The months that followed were a profound journey of self-discovery for Karen. As she immersed herself in the work of the Paralympic Champions charity, she found herself confronting the depth of her own ignorance and prejudice. Working alongside the disabled individuals she had once mocked, Karen slowly began to understand the challenges they faced on a daily basis. The struggles, the triumphs, the resilience. It was all far cry from the superficial world she had once inhabited. At first, her interactions were awkward and stilted, her old habits of entitlement and condescension creeping back in. But the champion, ever the patient mentor, gently guided her, pushing her to confront her own biases and preconceptions. As Karen's understanding grew, so too did her sense of humility and compassion. She listened intently to the stories of those she had once dismissed, their experiences shattering the narrow worldview she had clung to for so long. Gradually, the walls of resentment and defensiveness that had once surrounded Karen began to crumble. She found herself genuinely invested in the work of the charity, pouring her energy and resources into making a tangible difference in the lives of the disabled. The transformation was not without its challenges, however. Karen's old friends and acquaintances, those who had once envied and admired her, now shunned her, unable to reconcile the new, humbled version of herself. But for the first time in her life, Karen found that she didn't care. Her priorities had shifted, and the approval of the elite no longer held any sway. As the years passed, Karen's commitment to the charity only deepened. She became a tireless advocate, using her platform and influence to raise awareness and drive change. And in doing so, she found a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had eluded her for so long. The day finally came when the champion, now a close friend and mentor, announced his plans to step down from the organization. He turned to Karen, a knowing smile on his face. "It's time for you to take the reins, Karen. You've more than proven yourself worthy of this responsibility. I know you'll continue to honor the legacy of this charity and make a lasting impact on the lives of those we serve." Tears welled in Karen's eyes as she accepted the challenge, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and humility. The path that had led her here had been a difficult one, filled with pain and regret. But in the end, it had transformed her in ways she could never have imagined. As she took on her new role, Karen knew that her journey was far from over. But with each passing day, she found herself driven by a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to use her privilege and influence to uplift and empower those who had once been strangers to her. In the end, the woman who had once mocked a disabled man in the park had become his greatest champion, a testament to the power of redemption and the transformative potential of empathy. And